Hey everyone, good evening. It is Patriot Smoothie here at the Ottawa Courthouse at the end of another long day, day 23 of the trial of Tamara, Lich and Chris Barber. We continued after lunch with the examination-in-chief of OPS Officer Jordan Blondie, formerly of the PLT team. He was a partner of OPS Officer Nicole Bach. So he was testifying about his his encounters with Mr. Barber, but also about his experiences in general from the convoy. As we'll recall earlier, I mentioned how yesterday Presiding Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh made an interesting comment saying how the evidence so far was about the Freedom Convoy as a whole and not about Mr. Barber or Ms. Lich's words or actions in regards to something that the Crown was saying to her at that time, I guess in protest to something the defense was raising. Nonetheless, we continued with mostly testimony again about the Freedom Convoy at large. A lot of emphasis again being placed on the infamous Rideau and Sussex intersection. Officer Blondie testifying that they were aggressive over there, that they were yelling at them, shouting at them. I believe that was on the 16th of February. The next day he testified, either the 17th or whichever day it was. They went back after that initial day where they had a lot of yelling and confrontation, and they experienced less confrontation, but still a lot of issues. People had seemed to be in consensus to blare their horn, that as soon as Officer Blondie and his PLT teammates entered the area, there was a blaring of horns that he noticed to seem to be a consensus from the people at the intersection. So it's interesting how the Rideau-Sussex corner makes another appearance in the court testimony, as we've heard it many times so far in this trial. I really do believe there's a high emphasis on the corner of Rideau and Sussex to the justification of everything, for the criminality, as is alleged, of the convoy, of everything. It all somehow circles back to Rideau Sussex. Always a lot of attention paid to that particular corner. But in that light, also another comment from yesterday from Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh saying that it's clear that this is not just one group, the convoy, that it's at least maybe 18 or possibly 20 groups, but certainly not just one team of people, which is really important when considering Rideau Sussex and the things that officers are testifying about it. And again, not testifying that Miss Lich or Mr. Barber, the accused in this case, are actually involved in anything at Rideau Sussex, just that they experienced some difficulties there. There was also testimony from Officer Blondie about how they on one day, I think it was February 17th, again, if you want all the nitty-gritty details, go on my Twitter account at Patriot Smoothie, at RightBlend, sorry, and you can see all the details from my courtroom reporting there. But he testified that Officer Blondie testified that as PLT teams were moving west down Wellington towards Metcalfe, that they were surrounded, and they made a safety decision, I believe, on the 17th while they were messaging the blue letters. And one day it was the blue letters, I think that was actually the 16th. One day was the red letters, the 17th, and then the 18th would have been the police clearing. And on the 15th, they also did messaging with a non-colored notice. People who participated in the Freedom Convoy were aware of it, watching live streams. They remember the blue border notice to demonstrators message from the Ottawa Police, and then the red border notice to demonstrators from the Ottawa Police. So that's what he was talking about. He was handing out that, I believe, on the 17th, when he said he was surrounded by a group of people he thought to be associated with the demonstration, and that there was a decision made to pull out of that. They made it as far as Metcalfe, and then they left for safety reasons. So that was something he testified. He also testified about the so-called permanent structure that was erected in Confederation Park. He testified that it was maybe 12 by 12 feet in diameter and in size, and that it was made of wood. And then he said that he also attended that area with the NCC, I believe, to deliver letters. He doesn't remember exactly what the letter said, but it was from the NCC to the people there. He also testified that he gave out hundreds of letters, both those blue border notice to demonstrators, the red border notice to demonstrators, leave this area or you will be arrested, those ones, as well as other messaging, hundreds and hundreds of them. He said he put them into door handles, he put them under windshield wipers, he gave them out to people on the streets, and he said that he also personally messaged his contacts, the people he had developed relationships with throughout the demonstration, trying to convince them to leave peacefully, or if they were in the condition where they were determined to be arrested, or expressing to him that they were adamant to be arrested, he would explain to them the procedure of how they were going to be arrested, how that was going to go, but trying as much as he could, he said, he testified, to get people to decide to leave as that police action was going on. He testified that he had no role in enforcement with the POU, the public order units, that he was somewhat behind them, on the 18th as they made their way down from east to west on Wellington, and that he was asked at one particular time by the Crown, did he notice, a lot of questions, did you notice anything unusual about this, that, or the other thing? That was one of the Crown's general questions. Did you notice something unusual? And he didn't notice anything unusual about walking behind the public order unit, but he was actually eventually asked, did you hear them broadcasting a message? And he said no, he didn't. If you recall, previously in this trial there was some questions about any kind of broadcast going out from the police about leave this area or you'll be arrested, sort of a loudspeaker or something that they were playing that we saw potentially in some of the earlier videos in this trial. But Officer Blondie being just not a far distance behind these public order units as they were doing the clearing operation, testifying that he did not hear that messaging. So in that context, how could somebody, I wonder, in front of an equal distance, very close, also hear that message? Because even this PLT officer testifying he couldn't hear it from where he was over the sound of everything else or whatever else was going on. So a very interesting comment, I think. And again, he often had to refer to his notes. Keep in mind, the Freedom Convoy, more than a year and a half ago now, so when he was asked a specific question, did you count the vehicles at, say, Slater and wherever? And he'd be asked that, and he'd be like, well, off the top of my head, I can't remember. So he'd refer back to his notes, where he would then refer to them and produce the count for the testimony, for his evidence in chief, for his examination in chief. But again, having to return to those notes a lot. And that's a reasonable thing to do, because listen, this was a long time ago. I would be surprised if he did remember that. Now, you may remember from the lunch update, if I did mention it, there was a bit of a discussion about the summary that he made in preparation for this trial with Officer Benson, with Detective Benson, I believe, and others on the middle of September. And basically what that was, an 8-page summary of the things he was going to testify, no additions or changes to his actual notes or to his actual signal logs, which have both been produced and disclosed for the court. And it doesn't appear that this witness has an issue with his phone. It doesn't appear as if his phone was deleted, which is interesting. He also testified that he had signal chat on his work phone, his police phone, but he did not have his signal chat on his personal phone. So that's interesting. He doesn't have access to it anymore because he said he's no longer in the PLT, but all of that has been disclosed, and we've been going through that as he's referring material to refresh his memory in court today. So that's where we got a bit through the examination in chief of this witness, of Officer Blondie, but we didn't get to any cross-examination. The Crown indicating towards the end of the day that they still had a few more questions for Officer Blondie, but that could wait. That would have to wait until October 31st, when court will reconvene at 11:15 in the morning. And it's going to be interesting to see where defense goes with this witness. Again, a day of heavy legal arguments with the response to the position by Ottawa Police and to the Crown yesterday from Miss Magus and Mr. Granger this morning. So that was the first thing we did. And then we had Officer Blondie come and affirm to tell the truth and begin the testimony as I've described to you. My takeaway from today is it was a slow day. Not a lot of things said there. I mean, the thing about Wellington and pulling out because of a safety concern, I'm sure the defense is going to try to go into that more. We didn't hear from Officer Blondie's testimony that it was Tamara Lich or Chris Barber doing any of that. So that's going to be important. And bearing in mind the things that the judge has said yesterday, with a little bit of an insight into her thinking at this point, with the convoy being more than one group, 18 or 20 groups, as she said, and as well that, it's very unusual that we have two PLT officers who have deleted their phones, wiped their phones is what she said. So a very interesting progression in this trial. Towards the end of the day, before I say that, sorry, let's swing back just a little bit. Officer Blondie was testifying about Moving Day, February 14th, the agreement with Tamara Lich, with Mr. Barber to move the trucks. So he called that Moving Day. That was an interesting thing he used to describe it. And he said that on that day, Chris Barber had told him that he had 10 trucks ready to move, but that he couldn't move them because there was a cruiser in front of them. That's something that Officer Blondie testified that he apparently recalled from his notes. So that's interesting, that there was a cruiser in front of the 10 trucks that Mr. Barber expressed on Moving Day, February 14th, 2022, ready to move the trucks, but there's a cruiser in the way on Moving Day, so he couldn't do it. And then later saying also that there was another 13 trucks or something. I don't know if that's in addition or a correction to the number of trucks being 10, or if it's 13 additional, bringing it to 23. I don't know, but it was interesting takeaway that he was saying that Mr. Barber had told him there was a cruiser blocking it. Interesting, and so that was a very I think we could call that a very explanatory testimony there about the situation that was going on, and very limited direct testimony again towards Mr. Barber. Other than that, he testified to having a conversation with Mr. Barber, I believe, where there was a situation on Kent earlier in the protest, I believe around February 4th, where Kent was fully blocked, and then they were able to open up a one lane between one road and the other road, specifically in front of an apartment building. And I don't know what the purpose of that testimony was. In my opinion, which is, this is an erroneous, uneducated guess, that potentially it was because, maybe not necessarily erroneous, but definitely uneducated, maybe potentially trying to demonstrate that somehow Chris Barber had control of the protest, and that his involvement on this situation at Kent to clear up the lane demonstrates that Chris Barber had control of the protest at large. Maybe that's where the Crown's trying to go with that, but again, from the comments we've seen made by the judge in the courtroom so far pertaining to the legal arguments yesterday, saying that it's not one convoy group, it's 18 or 20. I don't know how successful that argument's going to be. We'll see how it plays out. I'm still very optimistic for the defense team. They're doing fantastic, and I'm very excited for them to actually start their case, their 6 days or more, whenever that may be. We're on day 23 of the Crown's case, going into day 24 of the Crown's case on Tuesday, Halloween, October 31st. It's going to be a very spooky day here at the Ontario Court of Justice in Ottawa, at the Ottawa Courthouse, as we resume this trial that has no clear end in sight. But I'm optimistic for the defense. Nothing again today being said that makes me think that there's a concern at large for what's happening here. I have good faith for Tamara and Chris. They have phenomenal lawyers. One more interesting comment to make. At the end of the day, the Crown rose for a housekeeping matter to address the court, expressing frustration that the date of November 2nd is no longer available, when they were under the impression that it had been reserved by trial coordination. Again, getting the messaging from Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh today that trial coordination is a moving target. If a date is reserved at one point and not taken in time, it's going to be given to someone else. At one point, Heather Perkins McVeigh, Justice Perkins McVeigh, even saying that there are cases that she has a 5-day in custody trial of somebody accused of a very serious crime who might be jordaned out if this has to be accommodated to make room for this trial. So it's not a simple procedure. But what else we're seeing is the Crown was saying that it's frustrating because on November 2nd, they said the defense is not willing to attend court. That was, I don't think the judge was perceptive to that comment, and basically read it back or said it back in a way that makes me think she wasn't receptive to that criticism. And basically what's going on is the defense, some of the co-defense counsel has other commitments on that day, but the point remains is that it's up to the Crown, I think, to make their case in a reasonable time, and they're not really doing that too great. We're getting testimony about the Freedom Convoy at large and not about the two accused. We're getting very limited bits and pieces about their involvement, and it's very weak in my opinion, but what do I know? I'm just Patriot Smoothie. I'll see you back on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.